Well, here we are.
That's right.
The few, the proud, the brave. Thank you all for staying.
That's right. Yeah, and quick thanks to so many people who helped put this on. We had a phenomenal production crew, CHRI, fabulous volunteers, a terrific planning committee, and as I think you would all agree, an amazing set of moderators and presenters in the course of these last day and a half. So our goal with this meeting was to give you a potpourri of the highlights of child health and where child health has been going in the last few years, and also to focus on the opportunities and the advances that have been made through what David has coined as a metadisciplinary approach, really pulling together diverse areas of science and technology, clinical science, basic science, public health, economics, education, in this effort to really understand the field as it is today. So, David, I have a joke for you.
It's time for some humor.
Okay, so what's the same about a bank, a piano, and a pot of glue?
I don't know what's the same about a bank, a piano, and a pot of glue.
Okay, well, the bank pays notes. The piano plays notes. And the pot of glue holds them together. You and I have become
She's a
the
pediatrician.
pot of glue.
She's a pediatrician.
So it's kind of hard to think, it's actually daunting to think about how we're going to pull together the diversity of the talks of the last few days, but we'll try and kind of see what we've taken away, what we've gleaned from a lot of the presentations. So let me start. You know, a lot of us think about genomics as the kind of ultimate in understanding the biology of the human disease. And I wonder what's beyond genomics?
So we have heard a lot about omics, all sorts of omics. And I think that one very broad way of thinking about it is that omics basically has taught us to read. And so we can read the genetic codes, we can read the omics, but now I think the next generation is we're going to learn how to write, and we're going to learn how to do editing in a way that really will allow us to change the narrative, so to speak, in a way that will allow us to do some of the things that John Day spoke about, or in terms of really changing disease outcomes, or what Cara Davis brought up today. And we'll be able to do it in real time. And I think is the next wave. And superimposed on that, I think that will be melded with cell-based therapies so that we can really deliver these altered molecules in a real-time way, in a continuous longitudinal fashion to patients that need it. That's where I see things going, but of course that's just a gross prognostication.
Well, I think I would add to that we also are going to have to look more systemically. That in some cases the clue, I think in SMA is a good example. The clue, or in cancer, the clue is a single gene. But for conditions that I'm interested in. Jim Woody brought up autism. There isn't a single gene. We know that there's at least a dozen genes that have been associated with the condition, and the same gene is associated with multiple conditions. So I think another place where we can get really smart and make headway is by thinking beyond machine learning to even more complex systems where nonlinear and multidimensional phenomena are emerging from a system.
So Heidi, that leads me to a question for you, which is how are we going to deal, or what might we be doing for diseases for which cure is not currently available and may not be available for the foreseeable future? How will we manage?
So, I think our last session was enormously helpful here, that we may not be able to cure asthma. Cystic fibrosis remains to be seen, diabetes, and we can get very smart in monitoring how children are doing, how their disease is fluctuating, and we can begin to intervene much more effectively, especially if we do it really early on. But I think to yesterday, and I think the other thing that we have available to us when we think broadly is that we can affect environments, and environments will have indirect and sometimes direct effects on children and children's health. So we can think about how we redesign an education system so that it promotes, let's say, literacy on the one hand and also healthy weight on the other hand. You know, it may be that a similar intervention, like when we place recess in relation to lunch, will be both helpful for children learning to read but also maintaining their weight. So, you know, when I was a graduate student in psychology, one of my teachers always reminded us to think mechanistically not only from the bottom up but also from the top down. And I think we can think not only from bench to bedside but neighborhoods to neurons. Okay, how's that? Is that better? Thank you. So we're curious about you all in the audience. Do you have any observations or comments that you think are important for kind of tying together this intense experience we've had over the last couple of days? Anybody want to either ask a question or make a comment? Well, I'll send another one to David while you're gaining your confidence. So how about supporting the kind of work that we've heard about over the last couple of days, supporting this work at Stanford and at Stanford Children's Health?
So I think, you know, one of the things that we need to give real serious consideration to is how we can best support work that both creates, translates, and implements knowledge that has been created or that will be created. So children's hospitals are tremendous assets across the globe and across the U.S. But as there is with every asset, there's also some potential pitfalls. And one of the pitfalls I think that many children's hospitals, and not Lucille Packard, have fallen into is that they're sort of insular in their own ways. We both protect the children, and at the same time, we don't always cross-fertilize to the degree that we might if we were with our adult colleagues or we were sitting at a university. And I think that we're sort of protected from that because of our geographic privilege relative to the hospital and the university. But I do think that having ways to motivate clinical trials, having infrastructure to motivate clinical trials and translational trials, and really turning the hospital, and I say this in the best of senses, turning the hospital into a laboratory for both discovery and for cure, where we are an engine for creation of new knowledge in the best of ways. I think that is what really needs to happen to really capitalize on all this tremendous potential we have. And I know that there are many people that are working hard to make that happen. We see that in terms of genetic diagnosis. John Bernstein and you and Ashley are working hard on that. There's many examples where Packard has been dramatically successful, yet you and I know that there's still more work to be done. And however successful we are, there are many places around the country that could do much better still. And given that there's not that many children with a given disease, we have to figure out ways to create these networks too, so that we can really create these discoveries as well.
I think there's also an important role to play in educating the public about how important these discoveries are. And I think that there's often an impression that, you know, participating in a study is like allowing yourself to be a guinea pig, and somehow that's not a very good thing to happen. But actually, in my experience, some of the absolutely best care is delivered in the context of a clinical trial. There's such attention to detail. There's such close follow-up. There's a commitment to what's the outcome, and there's a kind of concentrated effort to achieve the outcome. And so, I think that we all have a responsibility to speak out loud and in public about how important investment in child health is, how important participation in studies can be, and to really encourage the patients, the children, and their families to feel comfortable that they are being well taken care of when they take that step. Yeah.
I think this was a great conference, but I'm concerned about the future, and I'm wondering if there's any steps undertaken now at Packard to deal with the legislation so that the privacy that is evaporating can be protected for the patients.
Yeah.
Well, I think I think privacy is prized, and I think if anything, personally, we have gone to great lengths with HIPAA to preserve privacy. I mean, I'll just say my opinion. I actually think that we've gone to such extremes to protect privacy that in some ways we're making care far too difficult. So I personally am not worried about privacy within the hospital because we're so mindful of that. But relative to, if that's your question.
I'm concerned that the, oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I'm concerned that we need to have everything more transparent and have the legislature behind us so that people do not lose or have riders on their insurance policies.
I see.
Because that is happening.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important. That
Right.
I'm wondering if Packard has any program
Yes.
in place with the
So
legislature.
Packard has a strong community and a public policy arm. Sherry Sager is up in Sacramento quite routinely. Dr. Mary Leonard, as chair of the Department of Pediatrics, actually created a new assistant or co-chair, associate chair, that was the word I was looking for advocacy. And there are lots of efforts. I think that they're actually a bit more visible and a bit more active than they have been since Lisa Chamberlain took that role. So I think it is really important, and it is really important that we join with other children's hospitals in this effort, because the advocacy for children's health and for children's hospitals is quite different than for adult hospitals, where the prevalence of the diseases are often higher and distributing resources can be a really good thing. I think a lot of us are concerned that problems in child health are often rarer at a population level, and a concentrated center like Stanford Children's Health and Lucile Packard Children's Hospital are really important for getting the best care to those children. So I think that there are advocacy efforts, and we could probably use lots of volunteers in that domain.
Well, Heidi, I wonder if we should begin to think about moving this towards our conclusion. Can we advance the slides? Oh, great, thank you. I'll go back one, actually, to the PSA.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue the conversation through the course of the year. As you have seen, when Tony spoke yesterday, there's going to be quarterly conversations or conferences that the CHR is going to enjoy. We encourage you all to really come. The next one, I see Virginia Wynn's in the audience, and there's going to be a conversation about linking conception, vascular health, and preeclampsia. That is going to be May 7th, and it's just going to be downstairs. I hope we can continue to maintain this conversation and build on what we've developed. So there are many themes that we've explored in the last day and a half, and I kind of put them into 4 different buckets. And one was really discovery-based research, and another was translational science. We spent a significant amount of time dealing with whole child health and wellness. And then we also spoke of ethics, policy, and implementation. Our hope was that we were going to have a conversation about aspects that were truly transcendent, that if we were successful, we would have had pieces of this conference that fell into each of those buckets, if not having every part of the conference fall into each of those buckets. We had a conversation from Raj Chetty that I think was truly transcendent. We talk about economic opportunities for children, and I think we can all agree that that really fit into each of these categories. We were opened up by Tony and Michelle, and there were conversations surrounding the new opportunities for biology. And while that was discovery based, it had policy implications. It also had implications for whole child wellness as well. Jeff Kahn really spoke about the ethics of science and how those bright red lines might be encountered and how we might move things forward in an ethically responsible fashion and what the issues are. He helped us with that part of the conversation. Earlier today, we talked about novel treatments which had implications for cancer and neurology and drug discovery and the economics thereof. And again, I think that conversation, that session, had a foot in each of those different categories. Certainly, the session that Lee Sanders put together that dealt with literacy and health, that Dr. Snow, Parker, McCandless were part of, was remarkably illuminating in so terrifically many ways, in ways that I often do not think of. And I think that also was metadisciplinary in its way. Today, we heard about novel approaches to disease management from Carlos and from David and from Bronwyn. Tony Oro spoke earlier, and he gave us a quiz. I don't know where that falls into that category.
We had obesity.
Probably child wellness. Dr. Dweck gave us a whole new approach, at least me, for adolescent well-being. And I think there's issues how we're going to approach parents now and how we as parents, if that's the case, are going to think about how we speak with our children as well. We were all moved by the session that Dr. Joshi put together, and hopefully that will have some impact in how we practice and how we live. And again, I think there's no piece of that didn't exist in one of those categories or another. The obesity epidemic with that Tom Robinson put together, that session with Drs. Parsonet and Dr. Judy and Dr. Patel, showed us different ways to think about things and really approached the whole issue of this obesity epidemic from an immunologic, sociologic, an economic standpoint that I think also went through a lot of different sort of disciplines. I think we can all agree that Steve's talk from earlier this morning certainly cut across a lot of different lines and taught us a great deal as well. And so if the hypothesis that we were trying to test, Heidi, prior to this meeting was that progress lies at the margins of disciplines that previously thought were to be distinct, I think we can agree that we successfully tested that hypothesis. And as evidence to that...
Yeah, so go ahead, Tatum. Yeah, here it is in this word cloud. Here it is all put together. And with this as our backdrop, let's go all grab a lunch and keep talking.
Thank you all for being here.